Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Jim Neitzel. Jim brings a truly unique story, an amazing perspective to our conversation today. He was diagnosed with a rare degenerative eye condition at the age of 4. Over time, as the condition got worse, he was eventually declared legally blind in 2015. Now, during that time, in 2006, he started training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, eventually earning his black belts from Carlson Gracie Jr. He was a decorated competitor, having been ranked in the top 10 of his division for the International Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Federation, and now is a Jiu Jitsu instructor. For those of you that aren't aware, teaching any martial arts can be a complicated process, but jiu-jitsu, essentially grappling with another opponent, is very detailed and very technical. He started learning with vision, he's continuing his journey without vision, and he instructs both sighted and unsighted students with no functional eyesight currently. It is an amazing story. In his perspective, how he has learned to adapt and communicate doesn't just apply to martial arts. It applies to all of our high-value conversations and how we live and approach our lives. Whether you've ever trained martial arts or not, whether you're ever interested in martial arts or not, doesn't matter. This conversation is going to include perceptions, thoughts, ideas, techniques that are valuable for all of us. He's going to talk about how we learn to adapt without compromising, how he adopted the attitude of, how am I going to learn my way out of this? He's going to talk about how losing his eyesight helped him enhance his listening skills. But as he says, not in the way of when you lose your eyesight, your other senses turn into superpowers. That didn't necessarily happen to him, but he shares many examples of how he's enhanced his listening skills. He's also going to talk about the importance of generating hyper awareness, why context is so critical. He's going to talk about what listening to nonverbal communication means to him with some amazing examples. He's going to dive into his approach of infer and test. Make your observations, infer the meaning you believe, and test it, and why that works so well for him, and so very much more. An hour was nowhere near enough for this conversation. I'm so thankful for the time he shared and all of the insights he brought to the show. I can't wait for you all to hear it. Real quick before we dive in, let's thank our sponsors real fast. As always, we have HumanTell. If you haven't already, please head over to humantell.com. That's where you can learn more about their best-in-class online training to recognize what people are likely thinking and feeling when their emotions shift based on changes in their nonverbal communication and their facial expressions. When you're there, enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice. For the professional interviewers, please head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. That's over at certifiedinterviewer.com. And while you're online, please check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs that our clients ask us to customize and facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to teach them the skills, techniques, and perspectives required to uncover the everyday confessions that are hidden within all of their high-value conversations. Appreciate you checking out those sites. Thank you for being here again for another tremendous conversation. And now, without further ado, I introduce to you, Jim Neitzel. Good morning, Jim. I am very excited to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Dude, thank you for being here. I'm generally excited for these conversations because I'm a geek for this kind of stuff, but I'm super excited for this conversation. You and I were recently introduced. We had a conversation on the side, and now we're doing it for real this time. And I'm really excited to share your story, but really dive into how you learn as a student, but also how you teach. I mean, I could probably keep you here for hours. That's how excited I am for this conversation. But out of respect for your time, we promised no violin music, no details on it, but just to give people the context of your story before we dive into the communication aspects of this conversation. I'd appreciate if you could just walk us through, in as much detail as you're comfortable with, the story of losing your eyesight, and then we'll just dive into the communication after that.
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed with a relatively rare retinal condition when I was 4. It's called retinitis pigmentosa, and what it causes is it's a degenerative condition. It causes a progressive loss of eyesight in most people. And so when I was 4 years old, I started wearing glasses, um, and then eventually contact lenses. And every year, every couple of years, my I would lose more of my vision. In the beginning, it was something I could kind of pretend like it wasn't happening, kind of ignore and I could fake it a little bit, like I could see like everybody else. But by the time I was in my 20s, it started to be more of an issue. Contact lenses and glasses weren't really getting things done anymore. I was bumping into stuff more. I was starting to lose my peripheral vision, so I was kind of stumbling into stuff. And then when I was about 35, I was diagnosed as being legally blind, which just basically means I crossed this arbitrary threshold that most of my vision is no longer usable. Um, and now I'm in my mid 40s. I would say I don't see complete blackness, but what I see is at best indecipherable, and at worst completely deceptive. So that's been kind of the process of my vision loss. I think it's been interesting because I have had the opportunity to see the world as a mostly sighted person, and then as someone with a mild vision impairment, someone with a severe vision impairment, and now someone that's blind. And I've had to learn a lot of skills, and adapt my way of being in the world throughout that whole process. And a big part of that was in jiu-jitsu. So I started jiu-jitsu when I had a significant amount of vision. I started jiu-jitsu back in 2006, and uh, I was able to see then. I was able to see the instruction. I was able to, see my uh, the faces of my teammates and my opponents. And then eventually that deteriorated, and I had to learn how to kind of adapt along the way uh, as my vision deteriorated. So it's been an interesting journey for sure.
I'm sure that's the understatement of the day, that it's been an interesting journey. And I really appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about it and share it. I mean, at this point, I'm sure you've talked about it a lot, but I don't take it for granted. And I'm truly appreciative that you're willing to come on and share and to talk about it. Thank you. You talk about adapting and really adapting your entire life. Again, probably the second biggest understatement of the day, but specifically as we're having the conversation here around communication, before we dive specifically into the jujitsu, which I can't wait to do, and I hope other people stick around for, because there's so many great analogies and things that we can pull for day-to-day life and communication there. But as you were adapting, as your eyesight was degenerating, to use the term, I'm guessing that part of it was a real mindset shift. Like there has to be a will and a determination there that most of us just don't have any experience with, or haven't had to foster within ourselves. And then the second was like learning new skills and I'm assuming learning to use new senses differently and adapt. So I'm probably doing an absolutely terrible job setting up this question, but if you had just a minute to kind of walk us through the mindset that was involved in persevering and thriving through that. And then also, how did you learn how did you get yourself to the point where learning and capitalizing on the new skills could replace what the eyesight was previously providing you?
Yeah, I think to kind of address the first thing, when I had more vision, I don't think I fully appreciated exactly the journey that my life was going to take when I was younger. They told me when I was like 4 or 5 years old, you're probably going to lose your vision someday. And, when you're at that age, like what is someday, right? So I did what everybody does when you're a kid and when you're a teenager, when you're kind of planning out your life. And I had goals and I had aspirations of the way that I wanted my life to go. And then as my vision loss started to progress, um, I just wasn't willing to compromise on those things. And that was really hard sometimes, because things did get more difficult, certain things, especially. And so I had to choose, right? I had to choose, do I either compromise on my aspirations, or do I change myself? Um, can I learn my way out of this, right? Can I find a different way to do this? And at the time, I didn't know a lot of people that were going through a similar journey. Over the last 10 years or so, I've been fortunate to kind of meet a lot of people in similar situations. We compare notes, and that stuff is super valuable. But at the time, I just I didn't have that sort of network. And so it was just kind of having the open-mindedness to change who I am, and how I do things, all at every step along the way, so that I can kind of keep my eyes on the prize, and keep moving forward, and keep the tack oriented correctly, if that makes sense.
It does, as much as I can try to understand it from an outside perspective. And man, you just said a phrase that I wrote down and I'm going to share with my son, and I hope I remember always. How can I learn my way out of this?
Mm.
That I hope people just captured that, if nothing else, from the show. How do I learn my way out of this? We're going to kind of pivot towards jujitsu now, but I promise for the people listening, if you've never trained jujitsu, this is not going to be like a technical "how do you do jujitsu" competition. We're going to use it really to demonstrate learning and experiencing communication in different ways. But for me, one of the many things that I absolutely love about jujitsu is there's always an answer. I might not know what it is, but there's always an answer. Like, there's a counter for everything, and there's a counter for every counter. So that phrase of how do I learn my way out of this, and how do I change myself? Like, how many people in the world would sit back and say, this isn't fair, or now everybody else has to change to adapt to me? But you took on the mindset of, how do I change myself? Which again is one of like the primary principles of jujitsu. If I'm training with somebody who's bigger, faster, stronger, has better grips, is in a better position, I'm not moving that person, but I can move myself. And so if I focus on moving myself, even incrementally, I can get myself out of a bad position and into a better position. So for those that might not be familiar with jujitsu, especially jujitsu in a gi, which is kind of that, for lack of a better term, traditional martial arts looking uniform, jacket and pants, it can be very technical. It can be very grip oriented. Sometimes it moves very fast. Sometimes it moves very slow. But there are a lot of variables that are changing moment to moment. It's a very technical and complicated art to learn. And really, the only way you can learn it, here I am telling the black belt this, really the only way you can learn it is by doing it with somebody else. You can't do it on a bag. You can't do it in the air. You can't shadow grapple. I mean, there's drills you can do, but you got to learn it with somebody else. So when we talk about learning a way out, to kind of spin that towards your jujitsu experience here, and we'll tie it into communication throughout the conversation, as your eyesight continued to degenerate, how were you able to continue to grow and develop in such a technical art without being able not only to see your opponent, but to see the instruction in order to learn these technical maneuvers?
Yeah, so the instruction was the first hurdle I had to clear, right? Because if you've never been in a jujitsu class, typically what happens is you've got a group of students, and they're all crowded around an instructor who's demonstrating a specific move with a partner, right? You put your hand here, you move this way, and that's how you do it. So as one of those students that are just kind of crowded around, that instruction started to get fuzzier and fuzzier over the years. Um, and but it wasn't from the start. It wasn't from the start. So I could see some from the start. And that allowed me to kind of build a framework, right, for what I'm seeing visually, and mapping that to what's actually happening, you know, uh, from a tactile perspective, right? When I'm actually practicing the move. As the years went by, I started honing my listening skills, so that I could gather as much as possible from the actual instruction. And as the instructor is going on, like I'm visualizing what I think they're explaining. Um, and then when I get a chance to work with a partner, then I get to verify whether or not those things are right. And sometimes I'm completely wrong. It's just like, oh, that is not the picture I had in my head. And this makes so much more sense. Um, and that's kind of the way it went. And then I just started to become, I think, more and more tactile. And I would focus much more on the senses that I do have. Um, I know there's a thought in the world that when you lose your vision or you lose one sense, all of your other senses become superpowered. And I don't know if that's true, but it wasn't the case for me. But what I did learn is how to use my other senses more effectively, right? I rely on them more. And if for something like jujitsu, which is a grappling art, right? You're in physical contact a lot with your opponent. Usually what that meant is just being hyper aware of things like balance and momentum and inertia, centers of gravity, things like this that I'm not sure everyone develops if you can physically see your opponent. I'm not sure that those things are necessarily as important. So it ended up being that my evolution in jiu-jitsu was unique in that way, I think.
I think it's very unique in life, of course, but certainly in jujitsu, and it's like, for me, there are rare times where I have the choice to close my eyes.
Mm,
And usually, if I make that choice, it's because the person I'm rolling with is putting so much pressure on me
mm.
that I need to start focusing with other senses. Like the energy I'm devoting to my eyesight right now is counterproductive. They are so close
Interesting.
and they have so much pressure that my eyes can't tell me anything helpful at this moment anyway.
Yeah.
So I need to start feeling other options. That's a
Mm,
choice that I get to make.
mm.
And it's a choice that I make when somebody is trying to turn me into a pancake. That's not a choice that you get to make. So when you talk about focusing on your other senses, I love the concept of focus on what you do have, not what you don't have, like just in life. Again, that's a choice that some of us have. In this situation, it's not a choice for you. I want to make sure that I continue to honor that and not sound like I'm taking it for granted in the conversation. But as you have learned to really highlight those other senses, the first one I want to go back to is listening. Often for most of us, when we listen, there's pieces of the message that we miss or we misinterpret or we get lost in our own mind. When you are listening for instructions specifically, what elements are you listening for in order to make sure that you get as much detail of that message as possible?
Yeah. So when someone's like uh providing instruction, they're speaking verbally as they're demonstrating visually. And so some instructors are more verbal than others, right? But they generally always explain the move that they're going to be demonstrating. So today we're going to be working on a cross collar choke from knee on belly. Okay. So I have enough background to have a basic understanding of what that position looks like. And then I use that context in order to fill in as many details as I can, even if they're not like really explaining where they're putting their hands or where they're putting their weight. Um, I'm trying to infer as much as I can. I think that's something I've learned a lot. Um, I learned a lot about over the years through my vision loss is being able to infer things and then test my inference, right? Like, is this correct? Like, this is what I think it is. This is what I think is happening? Is this correct? Um, and and when you do that repeatedly, you get better at it. I'm certainly not perfect, but I'm much better at it than I was 10 years ago. And it's gotten to the point even where when I'm listening to an instructor perform a technique, I can tell from the acoustics if where they're turning their head, right? Like if they're facing the floor in a certain position, then that will tell me a lot about their body position as they're explaining that, right? Or if I hear them turn their voice away, or sometimes you just hear a little a grunt from the
A
the
gurgle.
yeah, gurgle, or and I'm like, okay, well, now they're applying pressure, like
He's
uh
joking.
yeah, clearly here's where the choke starts to come on, those sorts of things. So I think it's listening for those nonverbals, in communication, right? Like we always say that so much of the actual communication, the intent is nonverbal. And I think clearly a lot of that is physical body language that you can observe, but there's a whole lot that isn't the body language or the words, right? There's tonality, there's pacing, there's the direction of the speaking. All of these things, they're just parts of the puzzle.
That was a tremendous example. You can tell by the acoustics if they're looking away from you, if they're looking towards you, if they're facing down to the floor, if they're looking up at the ceiling. I added a couple there, but it's all the same thing. I can picture that from, again, you say cross collar choke from knee on belly. Okay, well, for the people that have never done this before, one person is laying on their back, unfortunately for them. The other person is kneeling kind of next to them with maybe their right knee on their belly, their left foot kind of posted out to the side. Make an X with your hands, grab their neck, start squeezing, for lack of a full detail description that nobody cares about. And that's what the knee on belly cross collar choke would look like. So if they have to really apply pressure and lean forward, they might be putting their head on the opposite side of the UK than where you're sitting, and they might turn and they might look the other way. So now we're talking about such a heightened level of contextual awareness. And yes, a lot of that is driven from experience. We've been in this room before, we've been in this position before, we know. But as listeners, if we really start taking in the context of everything that's happening around us, now all of these little details that might have previously been insignificant are very significant to give us the total scope of what's happening around us. And what I love here is, in a lot of ways, you just gave us a new definition of nonverbals. You even said it. Like, a lot of times we think about it as physical body language. What can we see that their body is doing? But you can hear nonverbals as well. And when we were talking previously, one of the things you talked about that fascinated me was listening to how somebody breathes.
Mm.
And I feel like this carries into conversations too. So without me stealing this from you, can you educate us on how you listen to people breathe when you're grappling with them?
Yeah, sure. So jujitsu's grappling art. So it looks a lot like wrestling. It just includes submissions like chokes and joint locks. So you're generally in very close contact with your partner or opponent. And oftentimes one person is on top, meaning that the other person is being trapped between their opponent and the floor, which is not the ideal place to be. Um, and it's typically a very difficult position to get out of. And so what a lot of people will do when they're marshaling their energy to escape is they'll take a deep breath. They'll before they explode, right? They're loading up before they go into this, or they'll hold their breath if something is uncomfortable, or if they're not sure what to do. It's a bit individualistic, but if you listen to those things, it tells you a lot about the intentions of your partner. I've heard some people say it's like mind reading. I don't relate to it that way, but it's definitely telegraphing, right? In the same way that certain movements have to precede other movements. Certain people will that are not aware of their breathing will start start to telegraph their intentions through their breathing. Some people will breathe through their mouth when they're about to execute certain moves. Um, my general rule that I try to tell my students is breathe through your nose, don't let them hear you breathe, because that keeps your breathing regulated, which keeps your thinking regulated, because the mind goes where the breath goes. So if your breath starts to get wild, then you're not thinking clearly. And also, don't telegraph. Don't give your opponent anything, because if you give someone a fraction of a second advantage in jiu-jitsu, that door's wide open. I mean, that's a lot of advantage in this game.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of my teammates right now when you say that. If they even have a fraction of a second, my whole life just changed for the worse for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely know guys like that too.
And what you just said about listening to them breathe, to kind of nerd out on communication for a second, is true when we're talking to each other. In order for us to talk, we need to take air in order to be able to give it back as we speak. So if we're having a conversation with somebody and they take a deep breath, often the deeper the breath that they take, the more power they're going to put behind their statement when it comes out. Now, based on the context and facial expressions, everything else, maybe they're happy, maybe they're angry. Like you said, it's individualistic moment in time. But the deeper the breath that they take, the more energy they're going to put out right after they take that breath. So it's true. And oftentimes, if somebody is surprised in a conversation or fearful in a conversation, you might see them hold their breath. So that kind of that same back and forth applies not just in jiu-jitsu, like so many other things we could talk about all day, but also when you're having conversations as well. So that's a great call out there. And I love what you said, your mind goes where your breath goes. Like for people listening just in life, the more we can work on our ability to breathe, increase our capacity to breathe and control that, it controls so much else. So that was a fantastic example. I'm curious, outside of breath, I know previously you mentioned weight distribution and center of gravity and maybe grips and some other things. Are there other nonverbals that you really try to attune yourself to when we're working hard not to be the one trapped between somebody else on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, in an art like jiu-jitsu, you want to be centered. You don't your commitments should be small. And so if you're grappling with someone and you hear them put their hand on the floor and it's loud, then you can infer that they transferred a lot of weight there, right? If the sound that their hand makes when it hits the mat or the floor is quiet, then they probably haven't shifted their weight much. You should be able to feel that if they're on top of you, but sometimes you're in a position where they're not 100% on top of you. They don't have all of their weight on top of you. But in order for you to be able to defend yourself or move into an advantageous position, right? It's important for you to know where their weight is, because weight is another way of telegraphing. And when you talk about like just thinking frameworks, right? There are certain things that are possible when your weight is forward, and there are certain things that are possible when your weight is back. To use kind of a specific example, so it's valuable to know that kind of stuff. This is all about context, right? It's all about gathering as much context as you can, which is I think something that I was really able to hone over the years, because context is absolutely vitally, critically important when you don't have eyesight that you can rely on. Having proper context is just the difference between being able to identify what's going on and execute properly, and just walking off a short pier.
Yeah. And for me to make it potentially a dangerous analogy with that is that so context is critical. Context is king or queen, really, in all of our conversations and all of our interactions. How many times have we made an erroneous assumption about what somebody meant or what their intentions were because we didn't have the entire context? How many times did we make a decision that we would have made differently if we had greater context of the situation? Oftentimes, if we're working on to get back to nonverbals with the client or a group, and they'll say, when I saw somebody react in a certain way, I knew that they were happy or unhappy or lying or whatever it was. And it's actually not the behavior that told us that. It's the context of the situation that the behavior happened in that told us that. But because we're so focused on the behavior, we assume it's the behavior that's telling us that. If we'd seen the same behavior in a different context, hopefully we would have realized it could have meant something else. So often we don't have full sight on somebody's full story, their full experience, their full intentions, all of these things. So the more we can gather the context in any relationship, in any conversation, the better decisions we'll make, the more accurate our inferences will be. And then when we go back and test those inferences, which we should, that's just a great way to live in general. Make your inferences, make your assumptions, and then test them. And sometimes it's actually great to be wrong because that's how we learn. And there's lots of safe ways and opportunities to do that. But now when we're making higher quality, more informed inferences, which means we have more to take from them when we test them, whether they're right or wrong. So there is beauty in your outlook and the way that you're putting this all together. Like it's amazing to hear it. And then just having a bit of a window into how you apply to jiu-jitsu is, I'm losing my words for it. I'm just going to compliment you all day long. But when you think about another human being going out of their way to restrict your movement and make you feel pain, and here you are using this type of mindset and approach in order to return the favor, that's significant.
Yeah, it's endlessly fascinating, right? I mean, I'll never be able to run on a treadmill again. Like when you've got this sort of mind puzzle that jujitsu is, it's physically and mentally challenging and everything all at the same time. And I think it is an art, right? It's not a science. It is an art, and you bring what you have to it. And I think at the highest levels, it becomes a self-expression. And so I think to your point earlier, that's why you can't do it by yourself, is because every partner is it's a different expression, right? Like no two sparring rounds are the same, because people are bringing what they have to bear, not only their physical and mental attributes, but kind of emotionally where they are, right? We always say like, uh, we know our training partners so well, so better than sometimes their romantic or intimate partners know them, because we know what they look like under stress, right? We know how they react to being put in an unwinnable situation. We know how they react when they are in an unlosable situation, right? And when there's a skill disparity, all of these things. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting that jujitsu allows you to kind of work on those things, and I've definitely used it to hone my skills throughout life. But going back to the context, I'll tell you the moment that really crystallized for me was, so at the time I was part owner of a jiu-jitsu school, and I was teaching a lot of classes. And I was walking down the street one day. This was when I didn't have a cane and I have a guide dog. So uh, I call those my faking years. I was faking like I was sighted. I just wasn't ready to let everybody know that the level of my vision impairment. And apparently, I looked across the street as I was walking down a busy street, and I accidentally made eye contact with a student of mine, and he waved at me, and I had no recognition of it. And I looked away, and he obviously felt very snubbed. And he had a conversation with another one of my students who knew my situation. And the snub student said, God, I think Jim is a sociopath, because he's so different with me. Like when we're at the gym, and like he acts really nice and everything, but man, I waved to him the other day on the street and he just blew me off. And and obviously there was conversation there, and he was provided with a little bit more context, which I hope changed things for him. But when I heard that story, it really hit me home. It's just like, wow, that happens all the time, right? And not just with me, like, not just that people misunderstand my situation, but how often am I misunderstanding other people's situations? How often am I missing the critical context, and I'm running around acting uh, like I understand your communication. And so from that moment forward, I just always assume that I just don't know. I don't know where the other person's coming from, and I try to treat communication as like an iterative process, right?
That Yes. Now here I am stuttering, trying to go three different directions at the same time. One, talk about like the ultimate miscategorization from sociopath to no dude just can't see. Like there's a big gap to jump between like even having a bad day to sociopath, but that's how far we went.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a shining example. But what I was writing down is always assume that I don't know, which and again because I want to come back to you teaching in just a moment. There's a whole nother probably 2-hour conversation we could have just around that. But a lot of times expertise or even just significant experience makes it really hard for people to listen and communicate with others because the more we know or the more we think we know, the harder it is to assume that I don't know and somebody else might have value to add to this. So when people achieve some level of leadership or technical expertise, it can become very, very hard for them to listen. And in at least in one field in your life, you've reached a significant level of technical expertise. Not every black belt on the planet will say I'm still learning, of course, but there's a real significant technical level of expertise. And the fact that you just called communication an iterative process couldn't be any more true. That we're constantly learning and taking in. You used the phrase the last time we talked, inventorying experiences. We're constantly inventorying our experiences, updating our expectations, hopefully adapting the processes that we use and getting better. And not only is communication itself iterative, but we generally communicate with people who we have iterative relationships with. Like there aren't many times where I talk to somebody who I'm never going to talk to again. Like
Sure.
There's some sort of relationship that's going to continue to put us back together. And so continuing to grow and learn, have that assumption that there's plenty of things I don't know, keep that curious mentality. That's, again, a tremendous way to look at things. Let's flip to teaching jiu-jitsu now. Because as you mentioned earlier, generally the way it's taught is I'm going to try to explain it while I'm doing it and I have a limited amount of time to get a few techniques in. And there's probably an infinite amount of tiny little details, but I at least want to get the most important ones in. So as you are teaching, how do you capitalize on the verbalization in order to make sure that your message is resonating as much as it can with all of the students who are in the room?
Yeah, I think I try to focus on a few key points, and these have been honed over the years. I did a lot of these things really poorly when I first started teaching jujitsu, and as I've progressed, I've seen better results when I follow a few key principles. So the first thing is I try to honor everyone's learning style. I know that some people are more verbal, and when they hear something explain, that's how they best learn. And some people have to see it, and some people have to do it. And so I try to honor all three of those things in each one of the classes that I teach, so that regardless of what your learning style is, your needs are being met. Um, I also try to focus on being really cognizant of my signal to noise ratio when I'm communicating, especially in a teaching environment. When I first started teaching, my initial instinct was to explain everything I know about this technique that I'm showing, right? Um, and I got different levels of success with that because the intermediate to advanced players would say, okay, know that, know that, know that. Oh, that third point is interesting, right? I didn't know that. I didn't think about that. And they would know enough to discard the rest that would become noise for them. But depending on where you are in your learning journey or where you are emotionally, where the kind of the aperture of your understanding is, it's you might not be able to differentiate between signal and noise. And as an instructor, I'm responsible for constructing a mental framework inside your brain. And so it's my job to say less and to make sure that you're getting the most important things first. And then as And then I can come around on an individual basis and say, hey, listen, I know you know the things that we already went over. Um, let me verify that you are where I think you are. And so I have them demonstrate the technique on me. And I say, okay, listen, you're in a good spot. The thing I didn't want to tell everybody else because I thought it would be confusing is X and XY, right? So, so that's just for you. Keep that to yourself. Don't confuse any of you don't confuse anybody else in the class, but work on that. See how that works for you.
What you just said in 90 seconds was a master class for leaders and teachers, regardless of what they're teaching and who they're teaching it to. Being cognizant of learning styles, trying to get to everybody. And I think you said the last one too for jiu-jitsu. Sometimes I just need to feel it. Like, I remember a more basic move, but the very first time I was learning a Darce choke, I just couldn't really land it. And honestly, sometimes I just miss a little. Like, you can be 99% of the way there with a lot of techniques and still miss by a mile and a half. And that's one where sometimes, although it's not an advanced move by any stretch, where if I'm not really paying attention, I get it just up. So asking my instructor, well, hang on, let me feel it. And then when I feel it, I'm like, oh, okay. Now I see what I'm doing wrong, or I feel what I'm doing wrong, and I can make the adjustment. So honoring learning styles, that signal to noise ratio, so many times, and I've absolutely been guilty of this, so many times, one of the albatrosses that technical experts wear is I am so smart and I know so much that I feel the need to convince you of how smart and great I am by forcing you to swallow every detail, every little thing I've got on this, which isn't meaningful at all. Like, I don't know if we'll have time to get to it in this conversation, but we talked about concepts over techniques the last time that we talked. Yeah, there's a ton of little details we can give somebody, but to your point, if you say the most important things first, whether you're teaching adults jiu-jitsu, kids baseball, or somebody on your sales team or your manufacturing team how to do something, give them the most important things first. Keep that signal to noise ratio proper. That's in the when I heard you say our responsibility is to create a mental framework in somebody else's mind. That's genius. As an instructor, as a teacher, as a leader, that's our job, is to create that mental framework inside somebody else's mind. What you just went through, I hope everybody, regardless of if you've ever been on a martial arts mat of any kind or not, that is a masterclass in teaching others. I really appreciate you sharing that. That was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, this is I think what's quickly become my life's work. But it's also it's still the gym to me, right? Like, it's still where I go to make myself better. And I train, right? And so I'm making myself better. I'm making my jujitsu better, and I'm still obviously learning, like you mentioned before, we're all still learning. But having this other outlet of learning to teach and and for me, it's a lot of it is learning how to communicate effectively. Uh, it's great. It's really great. I love nerding out on this stuff. I love it. That's why I was super excited to have this conversation.
Oh, dude, I've been taking notes the entire time listening to you go through this. Let's go back to that concept and techniques thing I brought up. I'm looking at the clock. I think we're pretty good. For people that haven't done jiu-jitsu, just stay with us for just a second. There's more than two approaches. It's certainly not binary, but a lot of times you hear guys talk about having technique-oriented approach. So I'm going to use this takedown to get to this position, to pass into this position, to set up this grip to go for this submission. And it's like they have like the names for those, and that's how they do it. And then there's people, and I tend to fall more into this category. I need to get this person off balance. Then I got to secure a post so when they fall down, they can't stop. And then once we're on the mat, I need to advance at least past their hips. And then I got to kind of get them thinking I'm going in one direction so I can find another direction. And it's more conceptual for me. So when you are applying the arts, how do you balance concepts and techniques really as a student and as a teacher?
Yeah, that's might be the most challenging thing about teaching, um, at least for me. But I think the way I look at it is concepts are context. And so while I might while some people might have to learn the concept and the context through the technique and through the specific example, uh, I think the more valuable thing is that you get to that context, that you get to that concept, because when you have the concept itself, uh, you're not limited to techniques. You can, there's when you know the cat needs to be skinned, you can use those 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Um, and and that goes a lot into just knowing where your students are. We talked a little bit about inventorying experiences and being aware of where what their experiences consist of, right? When I've been working with my students for a long time, I have the benefit of knowing what they've been taught, right? And so I know what concepts they've been taught. When I roll with them, I know what concepts they're getting their head around and which ones they don't understand. Maybe they understand a concept in this one area, but they miss it completely in the other area. And so if that's the case, like that's part of the learning journey, I know immediately, okay, that's where they are in the learning journey, right? Like they have a conceptual understanding that this technique and this concept are linked, but they don't understand the concept holistically. And I think that's the ultimate goal. And also I think that's why jujitsu takes so long to become proficient at. I mean, I don't want to discourage anybody from starting because it's the whole process it's a hell of a lot of fun, but it takes time to reach a level of conceptual mastery, or I won't even say mastery, I'll say proficiency, because you have to be able to understand that concept from every position, right? I have to be able to understand balance when I'm on top of someone, and when someone's on top of me, and when someone's in front of me, and when one of my feet is tied up, and when I have my hands on them, and when I don't have my hands on them. There's a million situations that concept could kind of show up, and the more the more situations that I can say, oh, okay, now I understand how that concept applies, the easier the whole sort of operation gets, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, selfishly or biasly, that's kind of how I approach it,
Mhm.
is techniques within a concept. So what's the concept that I'm trying to execute under, and then what techniques fit within that concept that can help me. And I think even to take it down to the very, very basics of balance, posture, and connection, or a base posture and connection. I'm trying to maintain my base, maintain my posture, and maintain a strong connection. And by the way, I'm trying to ruin that for you at the same time. And
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
can just understand that, to get back to, was it the Miyamoto Musashi quote? If you can see
Mhm.
the thing broadly, then you see it in all things. I'm probably
Mhm.
screwing it up,
Mhm.
but on getting that whole, to use your phrase, that holistic conceptual understanding. Again, like when I think about communication, it might be base posture connection for jujitsu, but it could be saving face, outcome orientation, and solution focus. And as
Mhm.
long as I have those three concepts and everything I say and do stays within those concepts, then I'm good. The specific
Yeah.
technique might not matter, and it can be different for different people as long as it stays within those concepts. Speaking of concepts, when we spoke the last time, now I'm going to use a striking analogy and a grappling conversation about communication. We'll just wrap this all up. But you referred to yourself as a counterpuncher. And for people who might not be into martial arts or striking, boxing, whatever, a counterpuncher is typically somebody who doesn't lead off. They don't throw first. They're not the more aggressive fighter. They're generally waiting for the other person to commit, and then they're going to execute their techniques based off of what their opponent does first. So a counterpuncher, although they might not feel like it because it could be their preferred approach, kind of is a step behind at all times, because I'm waiting to see what you do before I do. Now, strategically, that might not be true, but at the very basic level, I need you to throw a punch before I throw mine. So when you referred to yourself as being a counterpuncher, because in a lot of ways you have to feel what somebody is doing first, how is being forced into the role of counterpuncher informed your nonverbal communication, your strategic approach, not just to grappling? I know that's a lot of our conversation, but even off the mats.
Yeah, I think it's just I mean, I think counterpunchers have to be the best listeners, right? They have to be able to take in a large amount of information um, as quickly as possible, and they have to be able to make a decision on that information. That's how you know if you're listening well, right? In jiu-jitsu, if you're listening well, then you know someone's intentions and you can counter it. If you're not listening well, then you misunderstand their intentions, and the move that you make doesn't have the intended result. Um, so so from a grappling perspective, this might look like maybe somebody grabs my arm. Well, since my vision isn't really usable, I don't know that they're going to grab my arm until they grab my arm. So I can't react to that before it happens, which you could look at as a disadvantage, but you could also look at it as I get a whole lot of practice in identifying what's happening really quickly and in listening to all of the cues, right? The hand has gripped my arm in a certain way. I know where the thumb is. Okay. So I can feel where the thumb is on the grip. That tells me that the orientation of the wrist. If that wrist is orientated in that way, the elbow can only be in a few certain positions. And if that's the case, then I know where they can apply pressure. Can they apply pressure down from there? Can they apply pressure forward? That gives me a pretty good idea of what it is that they're trying to execute. And then I can try to solve that puzzle. If I'm wrong, then I know that something I inferred was wrong, right? Going back to the concept of like, infer and then test your inference. Um, and then the great thing about jujitsu is you get to test this dozens, maybe 100 times in a 5 minute sparring round, right? You're making hundreds of inferences, and you're testing them immediately. So I think that's what it looks like from a grappling perspective, and then kind of the same thing as it relates to communication, right? Like it's about being as present as possible. Because if you're in your head, I mean, obviously I've heard you talk about it. You're not listening. So, so being as present as possible so that you can receive all of that communication, all of that nonverbal communication, the volume of the words being spoken, the direction, right? Like the breathing, did the voice pattern change? Right, like all of these things to provide the context that you need in order to respond. Right, like I think counterpunchers train themselves to be like they want their number one skill to be responding properly as opposed to initiating, because we don't always have the luxury of being able to initiate.
Everything there was great. And for me, I know we said we wouldn't get too technical. Screw it. Let's get technical. Like even listening to you talk about like just the detail. Okay, he's got my arm, but where? Is it at the sleeve? Is it at the elbow? Is it at the tricep? Where is it? I can feel where his thumb is. Just that detail. I can feel where his thumb is. By knowing where his thumb is, I know where his elbow is. By knowing where his elbow is, I know which way his arm can or can't move, which offensively gives me a pretty limited number of things that I guess defensively, gives me a pretty limited number of things he can do to me. But then offensively also gives me a number of things that I could use to either break the grip or create momentum from that grip, or maybe attack that arm if he put it someplace he wasn't supposed to. And in communication, those same details matter. Does their pace change? Does their tone of voice change? What is the emotional connotation of their word choice? Are they leaning in when they say it? Are they leaning back? Like there's so many things that can be happening that for one of the ways, and here I'm going to temporarily steal it from you, I apologize, that I like to think about it is let the other person declare. Because once they've declared their intentions, I let them travel deep enough into the conversation. Now I have enough intelligence, I've created enough context that I can start making, hopefully, well-informed, better decision to use their momentum to get to where I want to finish. And if people, like just in a negotiation, in a sales conversation, maybe performance management, it could be interviewing somebody for a job. If I want to be the bully, if I want to be the initiator, if I just want to railroad this conversation from start to end, I miss all of those things. And there could be super important opportunities that I miss because maybe out of a fear-based mindset, I had to be in control 100% of the time. I had to dictate. But when we don't dictate, we learn, and when we experience. And when we learn and we experience, we create new alternatives. And just because you had a 4-finger grip instead of a pistol grip, now I know the way your elbow's locked. And by the way, you shouldn't have used your left arm in that position, so I'm going to take it. And it's all based on somebody else's movement.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I think that's really well said. And I like the analogy of, of using this, allowing someone to declare, right? Allowing someone to allow them to initiate, give them the freedom to express their intentions in the way that they want to, right? Because that tells you a lot too, right? Whether or not they're being clear about their intentions, they're choosing to express them in a certain way. I used to negotiate contracts, and that was, I think, a very valuable skill there is just learning to allow them to express everything that they think they want, or that they want me to think that they want first. Because the more information I have, now I'm equipped to respond, right? Now I'm equipped with the information, and I mean, quite frankly, I'm on a much firmer footing. You've given me a lot of information. You feel in control because you're speaking and you're initiating and you're declaring, and that feels powerful. But you're not gathering information during that process. I'm gathering information, which makes me more able to respond and to guide the outcome to something that's favorable for my side of the contract.
Amen. And I feel like for people to be able to execute that type of strategy, there's a real level of self-confidence and self-assuredness that is developed along the way, but also necessary, because that's not a fear-based approach. That's not an I don't want to lose approach. That is I'm comfortable with the capabilities I bring to the table. So let me give you every opportunity to either get to where I want to go without me having to put any effort in, or give me everything I need to know so I can use it to get to where I want to go, even if that's not where you want to go. And to make one more jiu-jitsu analogy, it's like, if you're headed in one direction, my best way, if I'm on the bottom, often my best way to sweep you is to keep you moving in that direction, not to stop you and get you going a different way. The same thing is true in conversations. Why do I want to stop them in their tracks and reroute them? The more information you're giving me, the more I can use your direction of travel to get to where I need to go. It's that counterpuncher's mentality. When you mentioned that on our last call, I couldn't write it down fast enough. That counterpuncher's mentality offers so much value. And not that people care about this at all, it's probably the single biggest part of my jiu-jitsu game I'm trying to develop, because mentally it's the game I want to play. But realistically, I probably do a little bit better when I initiate, at least keeping myself out of bad positions. But I feel like the real beauty is to be able to get out of the bad positions. So being the counterpuncher develops that sense of calm and the problem-solving abilities that allow us to do that.
That's really, really, really well said, because you like responding and counterpunching, countering, that takes much longer to develop. But when you initiate, it should go better, because you already know the direction that the things are going to be moving. Now the trap is to be able to take that initiation, for lack of a better term, away from yourself, right? To take that away from yourself, allow the other person to move first, even if it's against your short-term interests, right? Because that's the only way that you develop the long-term game of being able to respond, more efficiently. And that's really the game, is to have the elegant solution, right? To be able to respond with the least amount of force and the least amount of effort, and get the same result. And it takes a lot of time. I mean, easy for me to say, because I didn't I didn't have a choice, like I didn't have to force myself to respond. I just, if I wanted to keep playing the game, that's the way I had to play it. So it's actually hard for me. Like one of the things that I have to work on a little bit now is initiating more because I developed kind of upside down or backwards.
I want to get back to that in just a second. But man, when I have these conversations, I'm hopeful that it's somewhere in the conversation, somebody's going to say something and I can be like, yes, that's the title of the show. Like you ever watch a movie and the name of the movie inevitably comes up in the movie and you're like, there it is. Like it's the opposite. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm like, oh, I hope they give me the name for the episode somewhere. You've only done that like 27 different times so far. One example is the elegant solution. My goodness. Not only is that true for jiu-jitsu, because I used when I'm rolling with high level people and they submit me and it literally feels like they didn't even really touch me. Like there wasn't a lot of force. There wasn't a lot of pressure. There wasn't a lot of restrictive movement. It was just done. Like how did that just happen? It's beautiful. Elegant is the perfect word for it. That can and should be done in our conversations as well. We don't need to make people feel punished or bad or beaten or defeated in so many of our conversations. And we don't need to waste the emotional effort and the physical effort and the mental effort to make things harder than they already are. If we can develop the patience, in many ways, that counterpuncher mentality to understand the context, gather the information, and search for the elegant solution, we're all better off in every aspect of our lives, not just on the mats. Probably the funniest example that I have, again, jiu-jitsu reference for people who might not care, is for a little while we had a visiting instructor who was living in the Charlotte area. He was from Brazil, and he hit me with a helicopter armbar. And I was a blue belt at the time. And so basically a helicopter armbar for people who are listening, he's lying on his back. I'm in front of him, kind of on my toes, but in a crouch stance, praying that there's some way I can get around his legs. He gets his feet up on my hips, essentially pushes me up in the air with his feet, spins me to the side with his feet. I land with my arm between his legs on my back, and he puts me in an armbar from there. But the way he did it was pain and effort free. Like not only was he giggling when he did it, but I giggled as I was tapping. Like it literally felt like he was ordering a coffee. Like there was no extra effort into it at all. To find that type of elegant solution in all of our conversations, I think is a top level goal to strive for. Not just how do I solve the problem? How do I make this go away? How do I find an elegant solution for this? That was brilliant, man. Like I said, the 27th brilliant thing you've said at least, but that's a tremendous way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's super, it's super cool thinking about it that way. Especially with the, your helicopter arm. I have also been the recipient on the losing end of a helicopter armbar. And you can have a lot of feelings about it because somebody's just like physically picking you up and spinning you in the air and then putting you into a submission hold.
They're playing with their food at that point.
Yeah, 100%, right? But I feel like if it's fun and you guys are both laughing about it, right? Like that's the elegant solution. And what if we were all doing this as communicators? What if everyone on the planet, when we when we communicated with another human being, had that goal? I mean, I think that's an interesting world. I'd like to see.
I would too. Man, we've been going at it for an hour. I've been keeping an eye on the clock. I could ruin the rest of your day by keeping this conversation going. I really appreciate your time. If you're open to it, maybe we can do a part 2 at some point. We were talking earlier, I'm going to be in Chicagoland pretty soon. Hopefully we'll have the chance to get together. For people who are listening to this and they would love to stay connected with you, learn more from you, learn more about you. Maybe they're in the Chicagoland area and they want to get on the mat and try something new. You and I would both vouch firmly that there's no better way to grow as a human being than to get yourself on a jiu-jitsu mat and keep yourself there for years. But for people who are looking to stay connected with you or learn from you, where could they go in order to keep the conversation going with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best place is my website, jimneitzel.com. And then as far as training goes, if you want to come train and you live in Chicago, you're going to be visiting Chicago. I'm at Lakeside Jiu Jitsu. It's on the north side of Chicago. Got a great bunch of students, and yeah, I'd love to meet some of you guys.
I'm really hopeful. I'm going to be there in October. So if I can work it
Let's
out,
do it.
I'm very looking forward to you realizing that my thumb is where it shouldn't be and me paying the consequences for it.
I promise it'll be fun.
I believe that. I really do believe that. Man, I can't thank you enough. We were introduced recently, met each other briefly, and had this conversation, and 1 hour felt like 6 minutes. Thank you for all. I recently had a conversation with a gentleman who runs martial arts gym in Toronto. Systema is his main background, but he teaches different martial arts. And one of the things that he talked about was the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And you shared a truckload of both today, not just the knowledge that you've accumulated, but the wisdom that your specific set of experiences has created or developed for you. And everybody listening to this conversation should be able to apply it in all facets of their life. And I am truly grateful for the conversation today. Thank you.
No, it was great talking to you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
My pleasure, man. Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your time. I appreciate you sharing your story. And my goodness, do I appreciate your perspective. You said so many things and gave so many illustrations and examples that most certainly apply on the mat, but they apply off the mat, not just in our business conversations, but in our family conversations, strategically as we think and approach and solve problems. I truly appreciate everything that you shared today, and I absolutely learned and took so much from this conversation. Thank you. I mean, how do I go back and highlight a few things when there were so many to cover? To shout out a couple, the importance of developing contextual awareness that can't be taught enough. Just that story of somebody called you a sociopath because you couldn't see them. I mean, if we need a more stark example of the importance of developing contextual awareness, I don't know that we're going to find a bigger example than that. I love how you referred to communication as an iterative process, not only within the specific conversation itself, but within our relationships. That's so very, very true. When you talked about teaching, you talked about how it's our responsibility to build mental frameworks in other people. Yes, it is. What a great way to look at it. And then, man, at the end, you had to sneak in it's our job to find the elegant solution. Yes, it is. So many great insights, so much value in one conversation. So much respect for all you've achieved and all you've worked through. Thank you for sharing just a slice of it with us today. I'm truly grateful for it. Thank you to everybody that listened to the conversation. Hopefully you took a bunch of notes. That might be one to go back and re-listen to and take some more notes from later. We really appreciate you being here for another episode. Please, before you take off, take a quick moment to like the episode, subscribe to the show, share it, leave us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for being here for another episode. Then, of course, before you log out of the internet today, take a minute to go check out our sponsors over at HumanTel. That is where you can go, humantel.com, in order to learn from the very best when it comes to recognizing shifts in body language and facial expressions that likely indicate a shift of emotion, and then to use that within your contextual awareness to understand what people are likely thinking and feeling. I've done all their training myself. I recommend it. Head over to humantel.com and enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice. For the professional interviewers, please go check out certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered and learn everything you need to know about the International Association of Interviewers, all of their networking, educational events, and beyond, as well as the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. What does it take to qualify? How do you prepare for or pass the exam? What can it mean for your career and more over at certifiedinterviewer.com. And finally, while you're on the internet, please go check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs that our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, negotiators, sales teams, and more to teach them how to encourage people to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences. That's over at inquasive.com. Thank you guys for being here week after week. We do truly appreciate it. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.